Welcome to Mr. Horror Media.
In today's story, you will discover how a sound as ordinary as footsteps can slowly begin to dismantle a person's sense of safety piece by piece until the quietest moment of the night becomes something impossible to ignore. It begins with a man who believed he understood the house he lived in, a man who knew the layout, the creaking boards, the way the pipes rattled during cold nights. But one night, well after midnight, he heard someone walking across the floor above him. The problem was not the sound itself. Old houses make noise all the time. The problem was that the room above his bedroom had been empty for years. And according to the original floor plan of the house, that space wasn't even supposed to exist. The house stood alone at the end of a narrow rural road, surrounded by trees that had been growing there long before the structure itself. It was the kind of quiet place where the night didn't just feel dark, it felt thick. Sound traveled differently out there. When the wind moved through the trees, you could hear it before you felt it. When a car passed 2 miles away, the distant hum lingered like an echo. For the first 2 months after moving in, nothing seemed unusual. The man settled into a routine. Nights were quiet. The house had the normal personality of an older building, an occasional creak in the beams, a low hum from the refrigerator, the faint shift of wood expanding as the temperature changed. Those noises were predictable. They formed a pattern. And human minds trust patterns. The footsteps broke that pattern. The first time it happened, the man woke suddenly without knowing why. The room was completely dark. The digital clock beside his bed showed a few minutes past midnight. For a moment, everything was still. Then, he heard it. A single step above him. It was unmistakable, not the stretch of wood, not the snap of a beam settling. A step. A few seconds passed, and then another followed. Slow, measured, moving from one side of the ceiling to the other. At first, he assumed the explanation must be simple. Maybe the house was shifting in a strange way. Maybe an animal had gotten into the attic. The mind prefers explanations, even weak ones. They give the illusion of control. The sound stopped after a few seconds, and the silence that followed was strangely heavier than the noise itself. The next night, the footsteps returned. This time, they began at almost the exact same time. Again, a slow crossing above his bedroom ceiling, the same distance, the same pace, step after step, each separated by just enough silence to make the sound feel deliberate. He sat up in bed and listened. The footsteps continued for nearly half a minute. Then they stopped, and the house returned to complete silence. Over the next few weeks, the pattern repeated, always sometime after midnight, always crossing the same part of the ceiling. The sound never rushed, it never stumbled, it moved with a steady, almost patient rhythm. The man eventually decided to investigate. During the day, he walked through the upper floor of the house, studying the layout more carefully. There were 2 bedrooms upstairs and a narrow hallway connecting them. But the footsteps he heard each night did not line up with either room. Instead, the sound came from the middle section of the house, a part of the ceiling that, according to the structure, should have been nothing more than empty space between beams. That realization created the first real sense of unease, because once you begin to question the physical logic of a place you live in, the entire environment starts to feel unstable. A few days later, he noticed something unusual inside the hallway closet upstairs. Behind a row of hanging coats, part of the wall sounded hollow when he knocked on it. The sound was different from the surrounding structure, less dense. Curiosity turned slowly into concern. He removed the thin wooden panel that covered that section of wall. Behind it was a narrow opening that led into a crawl space between the floors. The gap was just tall enough for a person to crouch inside, A thin beam of daylight from the hallway stretched across the wooden planks within the hidden space. At first glance, the crawl space looked exactly like what you would expect: unfinished wood, exposed beams, dust that had clearly settled there over many years. But after a few seconds, something about the floor felt wrong. Most of the dust was undisturbed, except for a narrow path across the center of the planks, a path where the dust had been pushed aside, as if something had been walking there. He studied the marks carefully. They weren't deep impressions, more like faint disturbances in the thin layer of dust, but they followed a clear direction from one side of the crawl space to the other, exactly the same direction the footsteps seemed to travel each night. At that point, he convinced himself that the mystery finally had a logical explanation. Perhaps a previous owner had used the crawl space for storage and forgotten about it. Maybe someone had accessed it recently without his knowledge. There were possibilities, but explanations began to unravel the next night, because when the footsteps started again, he was already standing upstairs. He had decided to stay awake and listen from the hallway. The sound began precisely as it always did. Step, then another. Except this time, the sound was not above him, it was beside him, inside the crawl space. He moved closer to the opening and listened. The steps continued slowly across the hidden floor, but when he leaned down and looked inside, the crawl space appeared completely empty. No movement, no shadow, no shifting of dust, only the quiet wooden planks stretching from one side to the other. And yet, the footsteps continued. The human brain is very good at creating distance between what we hear and what we accept. For a few seconds, he convinced himself the sound must be coming from somewhere else in the house, bouncing strangely through the beams. Then the footsteps stopped, and a moment later, the dust inside the crawl space shifted slightly. Not in a dramatic way, just a faint movement, as though something had stepped down exactly where he was looking. But nothing was there. Over the next few nights, he began noticing smaller details. The footsteps always stopped when he approached the crawl space. The disturbed path in the dust slowly became more defined. Occasionally, the air inside the hidden space felt warmer than the air outside. The most disturbing moment came when he decided to leave a small camera inside the crawl space overnight. He wanted proof that the sound had a normal explanation. When he reviewed the footage the next morning, the video seemed uneventful at first. The crawl space sat quietly for hours. Nothing moved. But beside it, much closer to the opening where he usually stood, a second disturbed area had formed. A cluster of faint impressions, as if something had been standing there for a long time, facing the hallway, facing the exact spot where he always watched. The man eventually moved out of the house. He told himself the decision had nothing to do with the footsteps, just a change in work, a different opportunity somewhere else. But one detail stayed with him. Every time he heard the footsteps at night, they always followed the same path across the crawl space, except on the final night before he left. That night, the sound reached the center of the ceiling above his bed, and then stopped, as if whatever had been walking there had finally reached the place it was trying to go. Sometimes houses settle. Sometimes wood shifts in ways we don't fully understand. But if that explanation were true, the man often wondered why the crawl space dust still showed two distinct paths, one traveling back and forth across the room, and the other leading only to the opening in the wall, stopping exactly where someone would stand if they were watching the hallway, waiting for the next person to come look inside.